I'll never forget the sound of her voice breaking. There she stood at the pharmacy counter, trembling hands clutching her empty pill bottle, while tears streamed down her weathered face. "Please," she begged the pharmacist, "there must be some mistake. I've had this card for 20 years. I was only 2 people behind her in line, but I could see everything, including the younger woman standing slightly behind her, phone clutched to her chest, knuckles white." When the pharmacist swiped the card again and shook his head, the older woman's shoulders collapsed. But what haunts me most wasn't her desperation. It was the expression I caught on her daughter-in-law's face, a flash of satisfaction, quickly replaced by manufactured concern, and then unmistakably fear when she noticed I was watching. That moment in Walgreens changed the course of my life, and Elaine Miller's too. I didn't know then that I was witnessing the carefully constructed facade of financial elder abuse beginning to crack. I didn't know I'd find myself sitting in a courtroom 6 months later. My handwritten journals entered as evidence, testifying against a woman who had systematically isolated and terrorized her mother-in-law for $2,476 per month, plus the equity in a modest colonial house in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. I couldn't have known that the prescription for heart medication that went unfilled that day would lead to a police wellness check, 3 hospital visits, and eventually freedom for a 78 woman who had been living in a beautiful prison built by the person who had vowed to care for her. I should back up and introduce myself. My name is Margaret Donovan Maggie, 2 Friends End at 63. I thought I'd seen it all. 40 years as a high school guidance counselor had exposed me to every type of family dysfunction imaginable. I'd retired just 6 months before that day at Walgreens, looking forward to gardening, reading the stack of novels gathering dust on my nightstand, and weekly lunch dates with former colleagues. My husband Tom passed away 3 years earlier, sudden heart attack while shoveling snow. Just like they warn you about, and I was finally finding my rhythm in this new, quieter life. Elaine Miller moved into the blue house across the street 8 months before the pharmacy incident. I'd noticed her right away. We were similar in age, both widowed from what I gathered from neighborhood chatter. But unlike me with my regular walks and community garden volunteering, Elaine rarely emerged from behind her neatly trimmed hedges. When she did, it was almost always in the company of her daughter-in-law, Jessica Millara, sharp-featured woman in her 40s with the kind of artificial smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Mom needs help with her balance," Jessica would explain to anyone who commented on how she kept a firm grip on Elaine's elbow. "We're so blessed she agreed to sell her big empty house and move in with us after Frank passed." I'd tried the normal neighborly overtures, a welcome basket with homemade zucchini bread, an invitation to our street's monthly book club, even offering excess tomatoes from my summer garden. Each time, Jessica intercepted, "Elaine's resting," or "Mom has a migraine today," or "We're so busy with doctor appointments, maybe another time." The few moments I did manage to speak directly with Elaine, I noticed how she would glance at Jessica before answering even simple questions, her responses brief and rehearsed. The day after I witnessed the pharmacy incident, I was pruning my front hydrangeas when I saw Elaine sitting alone on her porch, a rare sight. Without overthinking it, I crossed the street, garden shears still in hand. "Beautiful morning," I called out, keeping my tone casual. "I've got some coffee brewing, if you'd like to join me." I noticed Elaine's eyes darting toward the window before she answered. "That's very kind, but I shouldn't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jessica will be back from her errands soon." I nodded, moving closer until I was at the base of her porch steps. "I was at Walgreens yesterday," I said gently. "It looked like you were having some trouble with your prescription." The change in her expression was immediate: fear, shame, and something else, relief. "Oh, it was just a misunderstanding with the insurance." Her fingers worried at the edge of her cardigan. "Jessica fixed everything this morning." "That's good to hear," I said, noticing the slight tremble in her hands, the same trembling I'd seen at the pharmacy. "I remember when my Tom was sick, keeping track of all those medications and payments was overwhelming." I paused, then took a risk. "Is there anything I can help with?" Sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who isn't family. For just a moment, Elaine's carefully composed expression cracked. Her eyes welled with tears, and she leaned forward slightly. "It's not what everyone thinks," she whispered. "Jessica and David say it's for my own good, that I can't manage anymore." But she stopped abruptly, eyes widening as she looked over my shoulder. I turned to see a silver Lexus SUV pulling into the driveway. "I should go," Elaine said, rising with difficulty. Thank you for the invitation, Margaret. Maggie, I corrected gently, and the invitation stands any time. I'm usually home, just across the street. I retreated to my yard as Jessica emerged from the car, grocery bags in hand. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw me. Mrs. Donovan, she called, voice sugary. How nice of you to visit. Mom's been having such a difficult day with her memory. I hope she wasn't confusing you with her stories. The hairs on my arms rose. I'd worked with enough troubled families to recognize the warning signs of emotional manipulation. Not at all, I replied evenly. Just being neighborly. I'll bring over some of my blueberry muffins tomorrow. They are Tom's old recipe. I deliberately mentioned my late husband, establishing my own widow credentials as a subtle connection with Elaine. Jessica's smile tightened. That's thoughtful, but Mom's on a restricted diet for her diabetes. No sugar. She turned toward Elaine. Let's get you inside for your nap, Mom. As I watched Jessica usher Elaine inside with an unnecessarily firm grip on her arm, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong in the blue house across the street. That night, I pulled out an unused retirement gift from my colleagues and made my first entry, documenting what I'd observed at the pharmacy. And during our brief conversation, I included the date, time, and as many direct quotes as I could remember. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with this information. But 40 years of dealing with troubled students had taught me one thing. Documentation is everything. For the next 3 weeks, I created reasons to be outside whenever I spotted Elaine alone. I learned that Jessica worked part-time as a real estate agent and her husband David was an insurance broker who traveled frequently for work. Their son Tyler was away at college in Boston. During these brief, seemingly casual conversations, I pieced together Elaine's situation through careful questions and observations. Elaine had moved from her home in Scranton after her husband Frank died 18 months earlier. Jessica and David insisted it would be easier for everyone if I sold the house. She explained during one of our short talks while Jessica was showing a property. The money went into a joint account to help with expenses since I'm living with them now. She lowered her voice. But I kept asking for statements, and Jessica said I was being paranoid, that I should be grateful they're taking care of everything. Do you have access to your accounts? I asked, keeping my tone conversational as I deadheaded the roses that conveniently needed attention near her porch. Elaine's expression clouded. I used to, but Jessica said I made a terrible mistake with an online scam, so they're protecting me now. She twisted her wedding ring, a modest gold band, worn thin with decades. I don't remember making any mistakes, but sometimes I get confused. The uncertainty in her voice broke my heart. Jessica holds my Social Security card, my Medicare card, even my driver's license for safekeeping. I documented everything, adding more details each day. The blinds that were always drawn in Elaine's first-floor bedroom, the way Jessica answered Elaine's cell phone, keeping it in her possession, the isolation from former friends. They're too far away to visit now, Mom, I overheard Jessica saying. Most concerning was Elaine's declining physical condition. In just the few weeks I'd been paying attention, she seemed to move more slowly, appeared thinner, and the vivacity that occasionally broke through was dimming. My opportunity to do more came unexpectedly. Jessica's car wasn't in the driveway one Tuesday morning, and I noticed Elaine struggling to retrieve the mail at the end of the long driveway. I hurried over to help, observing how she clutched a small piece of paper in her hand. Thank you, Maggie, she said, accepting my arm for support. Jessica had a last-minute showing, and David's in Chicago until Thursday. The mail's been piling up. I helped her back to the porch, where she sank gratefully into a wicker chair. Would you like some company for a bit? I asked. I've made too much chicken soup, and it's no fun eating alone. Elaine hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Jessica won't be back until after her afternoon appointments. She didn't leave anything for lunch. She glanced down at the paper in her hand, which I could now see was a prescription slip. I need to get this filled, but her voice trailed off. I can take you to the pharmacy, I offered casually. I need to pick up a few things myself. The relief on her face was immediate. Would you? Jessica was supposed to call it in last week, but she's been so busy. She looked down at her trembling hands. It's for my heart. The doctor said I shouldn't miss doses. An hour later, we were at Walgreens again, the same one from that first day. The same pharmacist was on duty. and I saw recognition flash in his eyes when he saw Elaine. This time, I stood beside her at the counter as she handed over the prescription slip. "Mrs. Miller, good to see you again," he said kindly. "Will you be using the same payment method?" Elaine's face fell. I'm not sure if the card will work. Last time there was a problem. The pharmacist Steve, according to his nometer, glanced at me briefly before addressing Elaine. "We have your Medicare information on file. There's a copay of $42.50 for this medication." I watched as Elaine opened a thin wallet and removed 2 crumpled $20 bills and a 5. "Is this enough?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. Steve nodded, processing the transaction. While we waited for the prescription, he lowered his voice. "Mrs. Miller, I'm glad you got your medication. Last time was concerning. Is everything okay at home?" I felt Elaine stiffen beside me. "It's fine," she whispered. "Just a misunderstanding." Steve handed her the medication bag, along with the receipt and change. "There's information in there about our automatic refill program. You can set it up to send you text reminders, or we can call you directly when it's time to refill. No third parties needed." The significance wasn't lost on Elaine or on me. She carefully placed the medication in her purse. "Thank you." As we walked toward the exit, Elaine suddenly stopped, turning to me with unexpected clarity in her eyes. "Jessica takes my pills sometimes, counts them, says I forget to take them, but I don't forget. Maggie, I've been taking medicine for my heart for 12 years. I use one of those daily pill containers." Her voice dropped even lower. When I asked about setting up automatic refills before, she said it was wasteful, that she would handle it. In my car, before starting the engine, I made a decision. "Elaine, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know you can trust me. Is Jessica controlling your money and your medication?" When she didn't immediately deny it, I continued gently. "I was a guidance counselor for 40 years. I've seen situations like this before. There are people who can help." Elaine stared out the windshield, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "They told me I'm getting dementia like Frank did at the end. That I'm making expensive mistakes. But Maggie," she turned to me, desperation in her eyes, "I'm not imagining things. Last month I asked to see my bank statement, and Jessica got so angry, said I was accusing her of stealing when she's sacrificed everything to care for me." "Do you believe you have dementia?" I asked directly. "No," she whispered. "My doctor said my memory is normal for my age, some forgetfulness, but nothing serious. But whenever I forget small things, keys a name, what day it is, Jessica documents it in a notebook. Tells David and Tyler how much worse I'm getting." Her hands twisted in her lap. "Maybe she's right. Maybe I am crazy." "You're not crazy, Elaine," I said firmly. "And we're going to figure this out together. But first, let's get you home before Jessica returns." That evening, I added several pages to my journal, including a detailed account of our pharmacy visit. I also did something I'd been considering for weeks. I called Adult Protective Services. The intake worker listened carefully as I outlined my observations and concerns, asking pointed questions about Elaine's physical condition, access to resources, and potential financial exploitation. They couldn't tell me if they would investigate based solely on my report, but they took all the information and gave me a case number. 2 days later, I was weeding my front garden when David Miller's car pulled into their driveway home early from his business trip. Minutes later, I heard raised voices from their open windows. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. That evening, as dusk fell, I noticed Elaine sitting alone on the darkened porch. I crossed the street immediately. "Everything okay?" I asked, noting her red-rimmed eyes and hunched posture. "David found the Walgreens receipt," she said, her voice hollow. "Jessica told him I snuck out while she was working, that I'm putting myself in danger by leaving the house alone because of my condition. She said you're interfering and filling my head with paranoid ideas." Elaine's hands trembled violently. "They're moving my bedroom upstairs tomorrow, where I'll be safer. David's installing new locks this weekend." Alarm bells rang in my mind. Moving her upstairs would further isolate her, potentially restrict her ability to leave if she had mobility issues with stairs. "Elaine, this isn't right. They can't force you to stay in the house, can't they?" Her bitter laugh held no humor. "Jessica has my power of attorney. After Frank died and I was so lost, they said it was temporary, just to help with the move and selling the house. I never revoked it." She reached for my hand, her fingers ice cold despite the warm evening. She has everything, Maggie. My ID, my social security card, my bank cards, the house money, $327,000 from the sale. I haven't seen statements in over a year. My monthly social security deposit, $2,476, goes straight into an account I can't access. My heart pounded as I recognized the escalating danger. Elaine, listen to me. Do you have any documents in your possession? Anything with your name on it? She nodded slightly. My old address book from Scranton. Jessica doesn't know I kept it. And my marriage certificate and Frank's death certificate. I hid them in a crossword puzzle book. Good, I said. Keep them safe. Is there anyone from friends, a lawyer, anyone you could contact? My sister Ruth in Arizona, Elaine said after a moment's thought, and Frank's old law partner, Samuel Goldman. He handled our wills. Her face crumpled. But I don't have their numbers anymore. My old phone was too complicated, according to Jessica. She got me a new one with only family numbers programmed in. I can help you find them, I promised. But Elaine, I need to ask, do you feel physically safe with Jessica and David? Have they ever hurt you? She hesitated. Not hit me. No. But sometimes Jessica grabs my arm very hard. And twice, when I've misbehaved, her word I didn't get dinner. She said she forgot. But Elaine's voice trailed off. The worst was last month when I had chest pains. David said it was anxiety and refused to take me to the hospital. I was so scared, Maggie. I thought I was having a heart attack like Frank. Every instinct I'd developed over 4 decades of working with vulnerable people screamed danger. Tomorrow morning, Jessica has an open house on Cedar Lane. I saw the sign. I'm taking you to my house while she's gone, and we're going to make some calls. Will you come with me? Elaine's nod was barely perceptible. Yes, she whispered. But Maggie, be careful. Jessica's watching you too now. As if summoned by her words, the front door opened, and Jessica stepped onto the porch. Mom, it's time for your medication, she announced, voice brittle. Her eyes locked on me. Mrs. Donovan, it's getting late, isn't it? Mom needs her rest. I stood my ground, just checking in on my neighbor. Have a good evening, both of you. To Elaine, I added softly, remember what we discussed about that gardening book? I'll bring it by tomorrow. That night, I could barely sleep. I kept thinking about Elaine, alone in that house, possibly being moved upstairs away from any chance of escape or contact. At 2:17 a.m., I was startled awake by the sound of sirens. Looking out my bedroom window, I saw an ambulance in front of the Miller's house, emergency lights pulsing against the darkened homes. Without hesitation, I threw on a robe and rushed outside. David stood in the driveway, talking to paramedics. I approached cautiously. Is everything okay? Is it Elaine? His expression hardened when he saw me. Mother had another anxiety attack. She gets confused at night, starts making accusations. The doctor prescribed something to help her sleep, but Jessica forgot to pick it up. The accusation in his tone was clear. This was somehow connected to my pharmacy intervention. One of the paramedics, a young woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, turned to David. Sir, we need to transport your mother-in-law to the hospital. Her pulse is irregular, and her blood pressure is concerning. The chest pain she's describing needs to be evaluated for cardiac issues. This is ridiculous, David protested. She does this for attention. My wife deals with this constantly. Nevertheless, the paramedic said firmly, we're taking her in. You're welcome to follow in your vehicle. I watched as they brought Elaine out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask covering her face. Her eyes found mine, wide with fear. I raised my hand in what I hoped was a reassuring gesture. Which hospital? I asked the paramedic. Abington, she replied before David could intervene. I waited until the ambulance departed, David following in his car, before rushing back inside to dress. By 3 a.m., I was in the waiting room at Abington Hospital, using every ounce of my former professional persona to navigate the system. I'm Elaine Miller's neighbor and emergency contact, I told the intake nurse, a technical lie but one I'd deal with later. She lives with her son and daughter-in-law, but they're not always able to advocate for her medical needs. The nurse Brenda, according to her badge, gave me a long, evaluating look. The gentleman who came in with her said he's her son and has power of attorney. Son-in-law, I corrected gently. And I have reason to believe Elaine is being medically neglected at home. She wasn't getting her heart medication regularly. There's a pattern. Brenda's expression shifted subtly. After decades in schools, I recognized a professional who had seen too much and developed a sixth sense for trouble. I can't share medical information, she said carefully, but Mrs. Miller will be admitted for at least 24 hours of observation. There are some irregularities with her medication levels. Will she have a private room? I asked, understanding the implications. Yes, room 412, after they finish her intake. Brenda's eyes met mine. We have very limited visiting hours for non-family, 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. But our social worker, Miss Patel, usually meets with new patients in the morning, around 9:30. The message was clear. I nodded my thanks and settled into a waiting room chair for what remained of the night. At 7:30 a.m., I stepped outside to call the adult protective services number again, updating them on the overnight hospitalization and adding to the case I'd started building. The caseworker on duty confirmed they would send someone to speak with Elaine at the hospital, a much safer environment for an initial assessment than the Miller home. At 9:15, I made my way to the 4th floor, armed with a small bouquet of flowers from the gift shop. David was leaving as I arrived, his face clouding with anger when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Haven't you caused enough problems?" I kept my voice level. "I'm just bringing flowers for my friend and neighbor. How is Elaine feeling this morning?" "This is none of your business," he hissed, stepping closer. "Stay away from my mother-in-law and my family. You have no idea what we've been through with her condition." "What condition exactly?" I asked calmly. Because when we spoke yesterday, Elaine seemed quite lucid about her finances. David's face flushed. "She's manipulating you, playing victim. She tried to empty their joint accounts after Frank died, nearly lost everything to online scammers. Jessica saved her from herself, and this is how she repays us, with lies and midnight ambulance calls." He checked his watch. "I have clients waiting. Jessica will be here all day to monitor the situation." As he stormed off, I entered Elaine's room to find her propped up in bed, looking frail under the hospital lights but more peaceful than I'd seen her in months. "Maggie," she whispered, eyes brightening. "You came." "Of course I did," I said, arranging the flowers on her bedside table. "How are you feeling?" "Better now. The doctor said I was right. It was my heart. My medication levels were too low." She glanced at the door. "David's angry. Says this overnight stay is costing them a fortune." "Don't worry about that now," I advised. "Focus on getting stronger." I lowered my voice. "Elaine, a social worker will be coming to speak with you today. Someone from Adult Protective Services, too. This is your chance to tell them everything, away from Jessica and David's influence." Fear flashed across her face. "What if they don't believe me? What if Jessica convinces them I'm confused like she does with everyone else?" "The medical tests don't lie," I reminded her. "And you're not alone anymore. I've been keeping records of everything I've observed." I hesitated, then added, "I found your sister Ruth's number last night. She's very worried and is flying in from Phoenix tomorrow." Tears welled in Elaine's eyes. "You called Ruth?" "I haven't spoken to her in over a year. Jessica said the long-distance calls were too expensive, that Ruth never returned messages anyway." A spark of the woman she must have been before all this flickered to life. "Ruth and I spoke every Sunday for 40 years, before I moved in with David and Jessica." Our conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock, and the door swung open to reveal Jessica, immaculately dressed as always, carrying a tote bag. Her eyes narrowed when she saw me. "Mrs. Donovan," she said coolly. "What a surprise to see you here so early." I wasn't aware the hospital allowed non-family visitors outside of regular hours. Before I could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway, a woman in her 30s with a professional demeanor, carrying a tablet. "Mrs. Miller, I'm Deepa Patel from Hospital Social Services. I'd like to speak with you as part of our standard assessment." She glanced between Jessica and me. "Perhaps we could have some privacy." Jessica stepped forward. "I'm Jessica Miller, Elaine's daughter-in-law and holder of her medical power of attorney. Anything you need to discuss can be said in front of me." She turned pointedly to me. Mrs. Donovan was just leaving. Miss Patel's expression remained neutral. "Actually, as part of our assessment, I need to speak with Mrs. Miller alone first. It's hospital protocol for all patients over 6. She gestured toward the door. "There's a comfortable waiting area down the hall where you can both wait." Jessica's carefully maintained composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of panic crossing her features before she recovered. "That's not necessary. I know all of Mother's medical history. She gets confused easily." Nevertheless, Ms. Patel insisted gently but firmly, I'll need about 20 minutes with Mrs. Miller alone. Then I'd be happy to speak with you afterward. I gathered my purse, giving Elaine's hand a reassuring squeeze before heading to the door. Jessica remained rooted in place until Ms. Patel raised an expectant eyebrow. With visible reluctance, Jessica followed me into the hallway. In the waiting area, we sat in tense silence until Jessica spoke, her voice low and dangerous. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're interfering in matters you know nothing about. I met her gaze steadily. I know that Elaine's medication wasn't being properly administered. I know she doesn't have access to her own money or identification. I know she's isolated from family and friends. Jessica leaned closer. You have no idea what it's like caring for someone with cognitive decline. Frank had early onset Alzheimer's. Watching him disappear, piece by piece, nearly destroyed Elaine. Now she's showing the same symptoms, but she's in denial. The doctors confirmed it. Which doctors? I challenged. Because from what Elaine tells me, her regular physician hasn't diagnosed any cognitive impairment. A flash of something calculation maybe crossed Jessica's face before she composed herself. We've consulted specialists. Not that it's any of your business. She smoothed her already perfect hair. You know, for a retired person, you seem to have an awful lot of time to meddle in other people's affairs. If you're so concerned about elder care, perhaps volunteer at a nursing home instead of harassing families who are doing their best in difficult circumstances. The implied threat didn't escape me, but before I could respond, Miss Patel appeared in the waiting area. Miss Miller, I'd like to speak with you now, if you have a moment. Her expression revealed nothing of her conversation with Elaine. Jessica stood immediately, shooting me a warning look before following the social worker. Left alone, I pulled out my phone and dialed Ruth Peterson, Elaine's sister, updating her on the morning's developments. My flight lands at 10:15. Tomorrow, Ruth confirmed. Frank's old law partner Samuel is meeting me at the airport. Thank God you found us, Margaret. I've been trying to reach Elaine for months. Letters returned, calls going straight to voicemail. I even drove by during a layover in Philadelphia last Christmas, but David said she was too ill to have visitors. Things will be different now, I promised. The hospital is running tests, and Adult Protective Services is involved. Having you here will make a huge difference. After ending the call, I made my way back to Elaine's room, finding her alone and noticeably more animated. Maggie, she said urgently, as I entered, Ms. Patel believes me. She's having a geriatric specialist evaluate me tomorrow, a real evaluation. Not just Jessica telling doctors what she thinks they should hear. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And the apps worker is coming at noon. Jessica doesn't know yet. That's wonderful, I said, taking the chair beside her bed. And Ruth will be here tomorrow with Samuel Goldman. Things are happening, Elaine. Her face sobered. Jessica was furious after her meeting with Ms. Patel. I could tell by the way she came back in here. All smiles, but her eyes were like ice. She said she's taking me home as soon as the doctor signs the discharge papers. Alarm shot through me. Did Ms. Patel say you could be discharged today? Elaine shook her head. No. She said at least 24 hours of monitoring, maybe more depending on the test results. But Jessica's already packed my things. She nodded toward the tote bag now sitting on the windowsill. She said hospitals are dangerous places for elderly patients, too many infections. I squeezed her hand. I'm not letting you leave until the doctors say it's safe, and certainly not before you've spoken with Adult Protective Services. I checked my watch. I'm going to speak with your nurse about the discharge status, and then I'll be right back. At the nurse's station, I found Brenda from the previous night, now joined by a younger male nurse. Excuse me, I said. I'm concerned about Elaine Miller in 412. Her daughter-in-law seems to think she's being discharged today, but the social worker indicated she should stay for further evaluation. Brenda frowned. There's no discharge order in the system for Mrs. Miller. Dr. Abrams wants the cardiac enzyme tests repeated in 6 hours, and the geriatric consult is scheduled for tomorrow morning. She lowered her voice. Between us, we've placed a temporary hold on visitors claiming to have medical POA until legal can verify the documentation. Standard procedure when there are concerns. Relief washed over me. Thank you. I think that's very wise. When I returned to Alan's room, Jessica was back, phone in hand, speaking rapidly. David, this is ridiculous. They're saying she needs to stay another night for tests that could easily be done outpatient. Call Dr. Matthews and see if he can intervene. She turned as I entered, ending her call abruptly. Mrs. Donovan, still here. Visiting hours for non-family don't officially start until 2 o'clock. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. Mrs. Donovan has been designated as an approved visitor by the patient. A middle-aged man in a white coat stepped into the room, extending his hand to Elaine. Mrs. Miller, I'm Dr. Abrams. Your cardiac enzymes are improving, but I'd like to keep you for continued monitoring and to complete the medication adjustment. He turned to Jessica. Mrs. Miller, I understand you're concerned about prolonged hospitalization, but in this case, the benefits outweigh the risks. Jessica's smile remained fixed, though her knuckles whitened around her phone. Of course, doctor, whatever you think is best. I'm just worried about the insurance coverage for an extended stay. Medicare covers this fully, Dr. Abrams replied smoothly, and I've already spoken with the insurance coordinator. He made a few notes in Elaine's chart. The nurse will be in shortly with your medication. Mrs. Miller, try to get some rest. After the doctor left, Jessica gathered her designer handbag. I need to handle some work issues. Since Mrs. Donovan is so eager to help, perhaps she can stay with you until I return this evening. The words were coated in honey, but her eyes were cold. We'll discuss your living arrangements when you're discharged, Mother. Perhaps a more structured environment would be appropriate, given these recent episodes. The threat hung in the air even after Jessica departed. Elaine's hand trembled in mine. She means a nursing home, doesn't she? That's what she's been hinting at for months. That I need more care than they can provide at home. She can't make that decision unilaterally, I assured her, though uncertainty gnawed at me. Not if your competency is established. That's why tomorrow's evaluation is so important. I hesitated, then decided Elaine needed complete honesty. The power of attorney is the biggest hurdle. If it's valid and as comprehensive as she claims, we need to address that legally. Elaine's eyes suddenly widened. Maggie, my puzzle book, the one where I hid my documents. It's in the tote bag Jessica brought. She pointed to the windowsill. Can you check if it's still there? I retrieved the bag and carefully examined its contents. A nightgown, toiletries, slippers, and at the bottom, a well-worn book of crossword puzzles. Flipping through it, I found several documents, carefully folded between pages: her marriage certificate, Frank's death certificate, and what appeared to be an old will. Jessica must not have checked it, Elaine said, relief evident in her voice. After Frank was diagnosed, we both updated our wills and powers of attorney. Samuel helped us. She took the document from me with shaking hands. This is from 3 years ago, before Frank died. But Maggie, I remember now the POI Jessica has was only temporary, 60 days, to help settle things. After Frank's death, Samuel insisted on the time limit because, her voice faltered, because he was concerned about exactly this situation. I finished gently. Elaine nodded, tears forming. Frank's mind was already affected by then. He kept saying we needed to protect my interests, that something didn't feel right with how Jessica was handling his medical decisions. She clutched the will tightly. Samuel will know. He has copies of everything. The remainder of the day passed in a strange, come the eye of the hurricane. I stayed with Elaine through the arrival of the Adult Protective Services caseworker, a compassionate but no-nonsense woman named Linda Brennan. Linda spoke with Elaine privately for over an hour while I waited in the hallway. When Jessica returned that evening, she was accompanied by David, both of them projecting concerned family member personas that didn't quite mask their underlying tension. Mrs. Donovan, David said stiffly, you've gone above and beyond. Neighborly duties. We can take it from here. I stood my ground. Actually, I promised Elaine I'd stay until she falls asleep. The unfamiliar environment can be disorienting. I used their own logic against them. Watching frustration flash across David's features, Jessica placed a restraining hand on her husband's arm. That's very kind, but unnecessary. Family should be with family at times like this. Before I could respond, Elaine spoke up from the bed, her voice stronger than I'd heard it. In months, Maggie is staying, and Ruth arrives tomorrow. My sister, she added, noting their shocked expressions. She'll be staying at Maggie's house while she's in town. The color drained from Jessica's face. You called Ruth, without discussing it with us first. I didn't need your permission, Elaine said quietly. She's my sister. David stepped forward, his professional facade cracking. This is ridiculous. You've been feeding her ideas. turning her against us after everything we've sacrificed. He jabbed a finger toward me. She was fine before you started interfering, Mr. Miller, came a stern voice from the doorway. Dr. Abrams had returned, accompanied by a security officer. I need to ask you to lower your voice. This is a hospital, and Mrs. Miller is my patient. He glanced at his watch. Visiting hours are ending in 5 minutes. Mrs. Miller needs her rest. Jessica recovered first, smoothing her expression into concerned contrition. Of course, doctor, we're just worried about her being influenced when she's in such a vulnerable state. She turned to Elaine with practiced tenderness. We'll be back first thing tomorrow. Mother, try to get some sleep. After they reluctantly departed, Dr. Abrams approached Elaine's bed. Mrs. Miller, the nurse, mentioned there might be some concerns about your discharge planning. I want to assure you that you won't be leaving until our full evaluation is complete, and we've discussed all options with you directly. He glanced at me. Hospital policy allows for one overnight visitor in certain circumstances. Given the situation, would you like Mrs. Donovan to stay? The relief on Elaine's face was answer enough. That night, dozing intermittently in the recliner beside her bed, I realized we had crossed a threshold. What had begun as concern for a neighbor had become a mission to right a profound injustice. The next morning would bring Ruth, Samuel Goldman, and the geriatric evaluation, all pieces falling into place for Elaine's liberation. But I had underestimated Jessica and David's determination to maintain control. Ruth's flight arrived on schedule, and by 11:30 a.m., she was rushing into Elaine's hospital room, Samuel Goldman following close behind. The reunion between the sisters was tearful and joyous, Elaine looking more animated than I'd seen her since moving to Lansdale. Samuel, a distinguished man in his 70s with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, carried a leather portfolio bulging with documents. Mrs. Donovan, he said, shaking my hand firmly, Ruth has told me about your intervention. You've done what many professionals failed to do: recognized the signs of elder exploitation and acted decisively. The geriatric specialist, Dr. Eleanor Chen, arrived shortly after conducting a comprehensive 2-hour evaluation of Elaine's cognitive function, mood, and capacity for independent decision-making. Her findings, delivered with clinical precision, confirmed what I had observed. Elaine showed no significant cognitive impairment beyond normal age-related changes. There is evidence of situational depression and anxiety, Dr. Chen noted, consistent with someone experiencing significant life stressors and possible psychological abuse. Samuel reviewed the power of attorney document Jessica had been using to control Elaine's finances. As I suspected, he confirmed, this was a temporary, limited POA, with a 60-day expiration. It terminated by its own terms. 18 months ago, he turned to Elaine. They've been operating without legal authority. The good news is, this simplifies our next steps considerably. Those next steps were set in motion with remarkable efficiency. Freezing accounts Jessica had accessed, filing a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services, initiating recovery proceedings for misappropriated funds, and securing emergency court orders to protect Elaine's assets and person. By late afternoon, the hospital room had become a command center for Operation Liberate Elaine, as Ruth jokingly called it. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Jessica and David arrived at 4:30 p.m., stopping short in the doorway at the sight of Ruth. Samuel and me gathered around Elaine's bed, surrounded by paperwork. What is this? David demanded, stepping into the room. Some kind of intervention. In a manner of speaking, Samuel replied calmly, rising to his impressive height. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I'm Samuel Goldman, Frank and Elaine's attorney. I've been reviewing the financial and legal situation, and we have serious concerns that need addressing. Jessica's carefully cultivated composure slipped entirely, her face contorting with rage. This is none of your business. You have no right to interfere in our family matters. On the contrary, Samuel countered, I have both the right and the obligation, as Elaine's legal counsel. The power of attorney you've been exercising expired 18 months ago. Every financial transaction, every medical decision you've made in her name since then has been without legal authority. David stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. You have no idea what you're talking about. We've sacrificed everything to care for her. Ask anyone. We're the model of devoted children. Devoted children don't restrict access to medication, I interjected. unable to remain silent. They don't isolate their parents from family and friends. They don't use a temporary power of attorney to drain bank accounts. Jessica whirled on me, mask completely gone. You miserable, interfering old woman. You've been watching us, spying, turning mother against us with your paranoid theories. That's enough, Ruth said sharply, moving protectively closer to Elaine. My sister has told us everything: the restricted access to her money, the lost phone calls and letters, the withheld medication. It's over, Jessica. David made a last desperate attempt, his voice softening as he addressed Elaine directly. Mother, you know we only want what's best for you. You've been confused lately, forgetting things. These people are manipulating you, trying to undo all the protection we've put in place. For a moment, the room held its breath. Elaine's gaze moved slowly from David to Jessica, then to Ruth, Samuel, and finally me. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. I want you to leave, she said simply. Both of you. I've decided to live with Ruth while we sort out what you've done with my money. Samuel is filing charges for financial exploitation. Her chin lifted slightly. I'm not confused, David. I'm finally seeing clearly. Jessica's facade cracked completely. You ungrateful old. She lunged forward, only to be intercepted by a security officer who had been stationed discreetly outside the door at Samuel's request. Sir, ma'am, I need you to leave the premises immediately, the officer stated firmly. The patient has requested you depart, and the hospital is enforcing that request. This isn't over, Jessica hissed as she was escorted out. You'll regret this, all of you. But it was over, at least the first battle. In the days that followed, the full extent of Jessica and David's exploitation came to light. $327,000 from the house sale, deposited into accounts they controlled. Monthly Social Security payments of $2,476 diverted for over a year. Additional accounts opened in Elaine's name, used to secure loans and credit cards. Total, nearly $410,000, had been misappropriated. The legal proceedings were lengthy but decisive. Adult Protective Services investigations substantiated claims of financial exploitation and medical neglect. Criminal charges were filed against Jessica and David for financial elder abuse, leading to a plea agreement that included full restitution, probation, and community service. Most satisfying was the restraining order prohibiting them from contacting Elaine or entering her property. Elaine stayed with me for 2 weeks after her hospital discharge, until Ruth could arrange for her relocation to Arizona. The night before she left, we sat on my porch, watching fireflies illuminate the summer evening. I keep thinking about that day at Walgreens, Elaine said softly. If you hadn't been there, hadn't noticed, I was disappearing, Maggie, piece by piece, day by day. Jessica was so clever about Ita. A little more control here, a little more isolation there. I started doubting myself, thinking maybe I was losing my mind like Frank did. That's how abuse works, I replied, thinking of all the students and families I'd counseled over the years. It's incremental. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already trapped. Elaine nodded, her gaze fixed on the blue house across the street, now bearing a for sale sign. Tyler called me yesterday, David and Jessica's son. He had no idea what was happening. He was away at college, and they told him I was deteriorating rapidly, becoming paranoid. He believed them because, well, they're his parents, she sighed. He apologized, said he should have visited more, seen for himself. What did you tell him? I asked gently. That he wasn't responsible for his parents' actions, that I don't blame him. A small smile touched her lips. He's coming to visit Ruth and me in Phoenix during his fall break. The next morning, as Ruth's car pulled away with Elaine in the passenger seat, I felt both satisfaction and a strange emptiness. The journal where I'd documented Elaine's ordeal sat on my kitchen counter, now part of the official case record. I had started keeping it out of concern for a neighbor, never imagining it would become crucial evidence in a criminal investigation. That was 3 years ago. Elaine and I still speak weekly by phone. She's thriving in Arizona, taking water aerobics classes, volunteering at the library, even dating a widower from Ruth's church. Last month, she flew back to Pennsylvania to provide victim impact testimony at Jessica and David's probation hearing. I'm not afraid anymore, she told me over dinner afterward. That's what I wanted them to see, that they didn't break me. As for me, my quiet retirement has taken an unexpected turn. After Elaine's case made local news, I was contacted by the county's Elder Justice Task Force. I now volunteer 20 hours a week, helping to train bank tellers, pharmacists, and other frontline workers to recognize signs of elder abuse. That day at Walgreens taught me that sometimes salvation begins with simply paying attention, noticing the trembling hands, the fearful glances, the inconsistencies in a carefully crafted story. So if you're listening to this and something doesn't feel right about how an elderly person in your life is being treated, trust that instinct. Look closer, ask questions, document what you see, be the person who notices, who refuses to look away. Because I still think about that moment in the pharmacy line, watching Elaine's card being declined, seeing Jessica's flash of satisfaction followed by fear when she realized she was being observed. If I had minded my own business that day, where would Elaine be now? I keep thinking about something Elaine said before leaving for Arizona. The worst part wasn't the money they took, it was the dignity they stole, piece by piece, making me believe I was worthless, incompetent, a burden. She had squeezed my hand then, eyes bright with renewed purpose. Never again. If someone you know is isolated, if their money seems controlled by others, if they seem afraid of family members, please be their Maggie. Be the one who sees them, who believes them, who stands beside them as they reclaim their voice. And if you're the one trapped in that situation, know this: you are not alone, you are not crazy, and it is never too late to begin again. Thank you for listening to my story today. If it resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences. Your voice matters here. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories of resilience and justice. I'm recording this from my garden in Lansdale, Pennsylvania, where the blue house across the street has new owners, now a young family with 2 children who bring Elaine cookies whenever they visit their grandparents nearby. Life comes full circle in the most unexpected ways. What would you have done in my place?